This is the next part of our How is Globalization Changing the World unit, and this is lessons 6 and 7. Why did Nissan locate in Sunderland? So this lesson we are going to look at why did Nissan locate in Sunderland. So first of all, you need to make sure that you've put that title in your exercise book along with today's date, and you have underlined both the title and the date. Last lesson, we were trying to think about why secondary industry might locate in a certain location, and we came up with some general factors for any type of factory, and we tried to think about the good and bad things about those locations. Today, we want to try and look at a specific example, because it's always good to look at an actual specific example, particularly if we were trying to use it in an exam answer. So today we're going to try and think about Nissan and why it chose to locate in Sunderland. So first of all, what I would like you to do is just to pause this for a moment and then to think about what might it be about a car factory, what factors might a car factory want in its particular location. Okay, so obviously today we are still looking at this big question 2, what are the factors affecting secondary and tertiary industry in the UK. And today, what we're trying to think about in order to do that is we're trying to interpret some Ordnance Survey maps to try and think about why Sunderland was a good location for a car factory, and then to try and think about some of the political and economic changes that might affect that particular industry in the UK. In order to do that, we're going to try and think about the different factors. We're going to look through some text to try and find that out, and then we're going to try and improve our map work skills to try and locate certain features using grid references. So last lesson we had a look at these sorts of factors. We said that factories might need to be near raw materials and suppliers, often that they want flat land, they want space, they need to be near to their local workforce. Roads and transport links are always very important. Some sort of power, often these days electricity, but that's important. And they need to be near to their market where they're selling their goods to. And obviously for a car factory, some of these factors will be more important than others. A car factory, in this case, as you can see in the picture, is the Nissan factory that we've got in Sunderland. Takes up a lot of space because a lot of process is required in that factory, and therefore it needs flat land. It also needs good transport links because it is moving finished products all around the UK and in fact Europe, and it needs a workforce that's nearby. Several thousand people work at the factory in Sunderland, and it needs to be near suppliers, or it needs to have good links to those suppliers. That might be the good transport links that are able to supply that factory with parts that potentially could come from all around the UK or even Europe. So there are quite a lot of those general factors that we looked at last lesson that actually apply to a car factory, and hopefully you came up with a few of those when you were thinking about them. Okay, so first of all, before we start to think particularly about Nissan, we're going to think about the word export. So in your books, you need to draw yourself up a little grid like the one on the slide in front of you, just to split your page or half your page into quarters. Obviously, very important that we think about vocabulary, because export is a word that you may use in lots of different areas. We certainly use it in geography, but it's not just something we use in geography. But it's important we understand what that word means in order to be able to understand it if it's written in a question, or to be able to try and use it in our written work. So first of all, I just want you to think about where you may have heard that word before, and just to jot down any ideas of how you might have heard that word before. Secondly, I would like you to try and write down what you think export means. Then I want you to try and come up with 2 sentences that use the term export. It may be connected to geography, it may not. And then finally, I'd like you to come up with a definition of the term export. Just pause this for a few moments while you split your page up and while you do those 4 different things. Okay, now you might want to make some corrections and alterations to what you've got, or you might want to add a few things in. Obviously, you may have heard of export in different ways, so your top left-hand section will have a variety of things in it. Export, though, tends to mean to send goods to another country to sell. In terms of how we might use that term in a couple of sentences, here are a couple of examples. So nearly all the bananas produced were exported to Britain. Or China exports a huge amount of goods to many countries around the world. And then a definition of the term export could be this: to send, spread, or introduce, and that could be ideas, beliefs, and goods to another country. So we can export ideas. It doesn't have to just be a physical product, but it's the idea about sending things to another country. If you need to make any corrections or alterations to what you've done, then please do so. Okay, so jobs are obviously really important to large parts of the country, and the Nissan factory up in the northeast of England near Sunderland, very, very important. As you can see, this is a front page of one of the local newspapers from a few years ago now, but showing how important it is that that particular company has chosen to continue to locate in that area because of the thousands of jobs that rely on that in the factory and also in the surrounding community. It's not just people who work directly in the factory, it's other factories that may supply that car factory. It could be shops where the workers go and buy food on the way to work. So there'll be many jobs that are connected. So really, really important to have a successful business and an industry in many locations around the country. So first of all, what we are going to try and do is we're going to have a look at a little piece of text. I'm going to put it up bigger in a second. And we're going to use this information to then annotate a map to try and show how the Nissan factory in Sunderland is a good location for this factory. So first of all, you're going to need to read through this text. As you read through it, I want you to highlight any key ideas that you see in there. Now, you can download this text from the frog page in the links on the right hand side, or you can have a look at it on the slide that's about to come up. As you look through it, just try and pick out what are going to be those important things about Nissan locating in Sunderland. Once we've then got those, we're going to use those to do a piece of map work with it. So here's that text. So spend a few minutes reading through it and picking out any specific examples you can see on there that might have been good about that particular location in Sunderland. Okay, let's have a look at the sorts of things that we might have got. So one thing that I've highlighted here is a skilled workforce. So really important for this factory to have people that could work there. And as we can see a little bit further down the page, it says in fact 7,000 employees. Second thing is we've got good road and rail links to major UK cities, so goods can come in and out of that factory. We've also got a port, which is only 5 miles away from the factory, which obviously allows things to be transported outside the country, and also to bring parts of cars into the factory, because other things such as engines can be made in different parts of the UK or Europe. Another factor that's quite important is UK support from the government. In this case, we've got grants of £40 million that were given by the UK government, and obviously that's going to be very attractive to a business choosing about where it's going to locate. You might wonder why, but obviously it's in interests of people that if you've got 7,000 people working, that for the government obviously is a good thing. That's 7,000 people who've got income, they're spending money in the local community, in local shops, they're paying tax, and therefore 7,000 people working for many, many years is going to make the government that £40 million back, and would be far cheaper than having to support them being unemployed. We've got a large flat piece of land with room to expand. In fact, it used to be a 300 hectare disused airfield, and therefore they could make the factory bigger as well. So that's a good opportunity. If the factory was successful, there's more space to allow that to continue to grow. Got space to be able to have a test track, so all these sorts of things take up a lot of space, which is really important, particularly for a car factory. You wouldn't need that for other factories, but for this one, obviously, they need the space. And in this case as well, they built some wind turbines. You may have noticed those on the photograph earlier, that allows them to provide power for part of the factory. And again, those need space. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Digimaps for School website, and we're going to use this to try and help us label some factors about the location in Sunderland. So first of all, we need to log in. So the username is on the page. So that's SK43HP. There's no space in that. You might notice that as the school postcode, but there's no spaces in that. And the password is also at the top of the page, which you need to put into your space on there. So it's GHARCS1457. So once you've got that in there, you can then log in. Once we've logged in, we're going to look at Sunderland. Now, in order to make that a little bit easier for you, I have saved that, as you can see on the left-hand side there. So if you just click on that, which says Nissan Sunderland, it will take you straight to the location. We can get rid of the sidebar for a minute because we don't need that. Now, this is the area where our factory is. In fact, we can see it's located there on our map. It says Motorworks. We can see those wind turbines as well that we've been mentioning. Now, what we want to do is to use the text that we've been previously looking at and anything else we might notice about this particular map to add some labels to try and show why this particular location is good for a factory. So we're going to use some of the tools that are down the left hand side. I know many of you have used this before back in year 7 and will know how to use this, but I'm just going to show you a couple of things that we want to be able to do with that. So the top one there is our drawing tools, which we can just click on. And then what we're going to try and do is we're going to add a few labels to these things. So we're going to add a text box onto our map, so we can click that, and then we can add text box on there. So I'm just going to get rid of our bar at the side. Now, what I'm trying to show here is that there are good road links to the rest of the UK. Okay, and we can see here that the road we've got is moving. Now, obviously, we need to move that or correct that. We can move that around, but we've got this main road on there. In fact, we might add on the fact that it is, and we can see just up here, it's the A19. So we're going to add in as well that it's the A19. Give us a little bit of specific detail. Okay, so that's one factor we've added onto there. Okay, we can then go back to our labels, our drawing tools, and we can add on another box. So we can add on down here that, and again, we know this from our text because we were looking at it earlier, we're going to add on that the docks are 5 miles away. And we can say as well that this is good for exporting to Europe. Okay, So we've got two examples so far already on there. And again, if we want to resize that and move it, we can do so. Okay, so we've got two labels so far on there. Now, you were going to try and add, obviously, more things on there. You can use the different features we've got on there. You can go and put place markers on, which we've got at the top. You could even try and, if you wanted to, try and find images that you could upload. So say you could find a picture of the docks in Sunderland, you can actually put the image uploader and you could put that on there as well. When you've then done all of that, what you're going to do is you are going to save that. So to save it, you go to the little filing cabinet icon on the left hand side and you're going to click Save Map, and you're going to give your map a title such as Nissan location. You can put your class name in and you can put your name in as well. Okay, now once all that's done, you can save that and that will appear on the save lists. And then you can go and look at that and alter it. But what I would also like you to do is to save a file and email me a file. So click printing, Nissan map, we're going to call it. Again, you can put your name in and so on. PDF format is fine, A4 is fine, and we'll click generate print file. That will then create a PDF for your computer. You can see it popped up at the bottom of mine there. What I then need to do is then save that and just email it to me or your geography teacher so we can see your map, and obviously then back in school we can get those printed off and those can go in your books when you're in school. Obviously I've got two labels on there so far, but you're going to have many more. Obviously we've got various things in the text we've just been looking at, and you can also think about other things you might be able to see on there. If you're not sure what some of these things on the map means, make use of the key. So say you want to know where maybe railways were on there, you could click the railway link and you could find out what those keys would be. And obviously there are other features on there as well that you could also use. So one of the things that hopefully we can see is that from looking at Nissan, transport is really quite important. And this little picture here hopefully just shows that idea that a lot of the parts for the cars that are actually assembled in Sunderland are coming from all around the world. You can look at various things on here. There's bits coming from Germany, bits from Italy, and actually 59% of a car made in the UK is coming from other countries. So that really shows why it's very, very important to have great transport links. And for factories like this, particularly Japanese factories, they operate on a process called just-in-time. They don't store huge amounts of parts at the site, and they rely on lorries and ships arriving just in time for the parts to go into the factory and to be put onto a car. So transport is really a key factor in making this factory run smoothly. So we came up with quite a few factors that hopefully would influence Nissan's decision. So lots of things that are going to influence it. Hopefully you may have also added others when you produced your map as well. So a map is really important to help us understand about location of all sorts of things, obviously in this case a factory. And so we've considered all sorts of ideas. Now in the second part of this lesson, which is going to be the next lesson you're going to do this week, we're going to try and think about trying to show some of those locations and a bit more of that understanding by using some map work. So maps often look like this, they have a grid on it. And again, we did this work back in year 7 when we looked at what are called grid references. And just for the first part, we're going to try and consider this and remind ourselves how these work. Now, you can either use this slide that we've got here in front of us, or you might want to go back to the Digimaps website and use that. on the Digimaps website, you can overlay the grid so you can see the numbers just like I've got there in the slide in front of us. So, little reminder, when we're trying to find things on a map, we use 4-figure and 6-figure grid references. So a grid reference is a number which gives a location on a map. We use them to say where something is, or could be helpful if we've got a map and we're lost and we want to tell someone where we are to try and find our location. Obviously, we're going to use it today to try and point out some of the locations of things around our factory in Sunderland. So, little reminder, hopefully a lot of you will remember this, but I think it's always good to come back to this frequently so we don't make any simple mistakes. We've got numbers running along a map. Obviously, the example we've got here is a small section of a map. The numbers that run along the bottom correspond to the lines that are going vertically, and those are called eastings. So we've got 30, 31, 32, 33, because they're showing you how far east you are. And then there we go, we can see those being highlighted. And we're always looking to the east of that number. Okay, so that would be column 30. And then the numbers on the side are called northings because they show us how far north we are. So we've got 44, 45, 46, and 47. And again, we're thinking about things above the line. So everything in that row there would be in 44. Always remember, really, really important, you know, we say this all the way through, people in year 11 still remember it like this, that you need to go along the bottom first, eastings, and then northings up the side. And a lot of people remember that using along the corridor and up the stairs. So if we were trying to look for a grid reference for, in this particular case, the blue square that we've got on there, we need to go along the corridor and then up the stairs. We need to look at our eastings first along the bottom, and then we need to look at our northings. So we'd move along the bottom until we got to our eastings, which is easting number 32. And then we'd use our northings and we'd go up the side until we got to 46. And the blue square is going to be in 3246. Remember, everything to the east of 32 is going to be the column we've got there, and everything to the north, the line 46, is going to be above that, and is that row there. So the square we're looking at is going to be 3246. So the next stage is 6-figure grid references. 4-figure grid references give us a location, but they're not very specific. They in fact tell us a square that is 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters, or 1 kilometer, which is or could be not accurate enough to try and find a location. We need to use 6-figure grid references in order to be more accurate about where something is within a square. So in this particular example we've got here, we've got a grid square which actually its 4-figure grid reference will be 3246, but we've got 2 places within this grid square. So we could imagine we've got a school and a church in this square shown by the 2 blue dots. Now, in order to think about where they're located, we've got to imagine that that square is divided up again into 10 smaller sections, or in fact 100 smaller squares. So it would look something like this in our minds. So if we wanted to look at the blue dot at the bottom of the square, we would be able to count along how far that was. So we know it's in square 32, but if we count along, we can see it's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10 of the way along. In fact, it's right in the middle. You could work that out maybe without the squares being there. So it's 5/10 of the way along that square. So we would say that on the eastings, it is 325. We then want to know how far north it is. Now, we know it's in square 46, but in this particular case, it's 1/10 of the way up that square, or 1/10 of the way north of that square. So in this particular case, it would be at 461. So our bottom blue dot would be at 325461. The other blue dot, again, is in the same square. So again, we know it's 3, 2, and this time it's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10 of the way along the bottom. So we know it's 3, 2, 3. And going north, it's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10 north. So it's 4, 6, 5. So that particular 6-figure grid reference would be 3, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5. That gives us a much more precise location for our church and our school that we've got on our map. So now we've looked at that, we can now apply that to be able to use this in Sunderland, the example we were looking at last lesson. So you could use this and pause this particular slide and work from this slide, or come back to this in a minute, or you could go and use the Digimaps website that again we looked at last lesson. You can see that I've overlaid this map with the grid, and we can see where those are. Because it's been done by the computer, the numbers for our eastings happen to be at the top of this section, but it just depends on a computer where you move them around. So it's same thing applies. Now, using this map, we're going to have a look at a few particular skills. I'd like you to have a go at trying to work out these particular questions. So you're going to need to pause this and see if you can work out the grid reference to the factory. See if you can work out how far it is in kilometres from the junction of the A184 to the A194. And there's a grid reference there, a 6-figure grid reference to show that location. Now remember, each grid square is 1 kilometre, so you can hopefully use the grid squares to allow you to work that out. What is the height of the land in the middle of the factory test track in square 3357? So find square 3357 and see if there's any indication on there, figures that tell you how high that land is. Could be a little dot with a black number next to it, or it could be orange contour lines with a height on it. And then finally, if you were stood in the middle of the Nissan factory, which direction would it be to the centre of Washington? So Washington's a nearby location. Where would you be facing? What direction would you be facing if you were in the middle of that factory looking towards Washington? So use the Digimaps website, password and username are at the bottom there, or go back a section and have a look at the map on the previous part of this recording. Pause this while you get on and have a go at trying to work out those answers. Okay, let's see if we can go through our answers. So you might want to correct these, green pen these as you do so. So grid reference for the Nissan factory, 3458 or 3358. Obviously, it's a big factory. It takes up more than one grid square, so there's more than one answer. How far is it between those junctions? It is 3.5 kilometers, 3.5 kilometers. Always remember to put the units on there. The height of the land is 37 meters. And if you were stood in the middle of the Nissan factory and you were looking towards Washington, you would be looking in a southwesterly direction. So hopefully you were able to use that map to be able to work out those answers. Okay, finishing off then this work today, having thought about everything we've looked at today from our map work, having thought about what we looked at last lesson as well, I'd like you to have a go at answering these 3 questions in your book. Why is Sunderland a good location for the factory? Could you explain, based on everything we've said, why you think this is a particularly good location? How do you think that factory is going to benefit local people? And what might happen if the factory closes down? Remember those terms we always want to use to speak like a geographer. You know, can we make use of the words social, economic, environmental? Some good terms that we could use there as part of those answers. You can answer those as 3 separate questions if you like, or if you prefer, put it all together as one piece of text. Hopefully, some of you could have a go at the Superstar Geographer task as well. Explain how Britain leaving the EU may affect Nissan and affect its decision as to make cars in Sunderland. Do you think that that change in our status in Europe is going to have any impact on what is happening there in Sunderland? And our final piece of work is just to come up with a advert, a poster, to try and persuade Nissan to keep manufacturing more cars in Sunderland. How could you get across to the bosses of Nissan, based in Japan, that that factory is really, really important to the people of Sunderland? It's really important to the people of the UK. What could you include that shows that that is a really important secondary industry for the UK?